This story delves into themes of psychological mystery and unsettling events. Listener discretion is advised. It started, as many nightmares do, innocuously enough. A barely perceptible shiver of sound from the old air vents in the Crestwood Public Library. Not the usual sighing of ancient machinery, or the distant thrum of the city outside, but something else entirely. Something that felt wrong. My name is Sarah Jenkins. 2 years ago, I landed my dream job. A librarian at Crestwood. It wasn't the biggest city, but the library was a monument. A grand Gothic revival structure built in the early 1900s, all soaring arches, hushed reading rooms, and the intoxicating scent of aged paper. For me, it was a sanctuary, a quiet kingdom of knowledge where I felt utterly at home. I loved the respectful silence, the rhythmic turning of pages, the soft creak of the floorboards as patrons moved between towering shelves. It was a place steeped in history, a comforting constant in a chaotic world. But then the whispers began. First, I dismissed them. The Crestwood Library was old after all. Old buildings settle. Pipes groan. Air ducts rattle. I told myself it was just the building breathing, exhaling the accumulated dust and stories of a century. I'd be shelving a forgotten volume in the vast, dimly lit archives on the 3rd floor, or reorganizing the periodical section in the basement, and I'd hear it. A faint, almost imperceptible murmur, like distant voices speaking just beyond the reach of understanding. It was too soft to be words, too indistinct to be human. It was just sound, a low, sibilant hum that seemed to emanate from the very walls, particularly from the ornate, filigreed grates of the ventilation system. I'd pause, head cocked, straining to hear. The sound would vanish. The library would return to its familiar, comforting hush. I'd shake my head, smile at my own overactive imagination, and go back to work. New job, new environment. I was probably just hyper-aware, my senses on high alert. That was my rationalization, and for weeks it satisfied me. But the whispers didn't stop. They became more frequent, more insistent. They weren't just random static anymore. There was a rhythm to them, a peculiar cadence that hinted at communication. Imagine standing on a busy street corner, surrounded by a cacophony of conversations, but only catching fleeting fragments, disembodied syllables that mean nothing on their own. That was what it was like, only magnified by the unnatural silence of the library. It wasn't the comforting murmur of patrons. It was something deeper, something embedded in the very fabric of the building, a sound that seemed to snake its way through the intricate network of ducts, echoing from every vent. I started noticing patterns. The whispers were most prominent in the late afternoons, as the sun began to dip, casting long, eerie shadows across the reading rooms. They were loudest in the less frequented areas, the dusty non-fiction stacks on the 2nd floor, the obscure local history room, and especially in the vast, cavernous basement where the oldest, most fragile tomes were stored. This was where I spent most of my time, meticulously cataloging rare manuscripts and preserving delicate maps. The basement, with its low ceilings and labyrinthine corridors of shelves, became a focal point for the unsettling phenomenon. One Tuesday, I was alone in the local history room, a small circular space tucked away behind the main reference desk. The room was lined with dark mahogany shelves overflowing with century-old town records, faded photographs, and the personal journals of long-dead Crestwood residents. The air was thick with the scent of dry paper and forgotten lives. I was cross-referencing an entry in a 1910 town ledger when I heard it again, clearer this time. A distinct, almost guttural whisper that seemed to emanate directly from the large decorative vent above the doorway. It wasn't just a hum, felt like a word, a single, drawn-out syllable, impossible to decipher, but undeniably present. It sent a prickle of ice down my spine. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs, expecting to see a colleague playing a prank, or perhaps a curious patron. But the room was empty. The door was slightly ajar, just as I'd left it. The silence that followed was absolute, almost suffocating, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I tried to rationalize it again. Old pipes, air pressure, my imagination. But the rationalizations were starting to wear thin. The whispers felt too deliberate, too focused. They felt like they were for me. I started talking about it cautiously at first to David Miller. David was a senior librarian, a man in his late 50s with a perpetually rumpled tweed jacket and a deep love for obscure sci-fi novels. He'd been at Crestwood for 30 years and knew every creak and groan of the building. "David," I began one afternoon as we were taking our coffee break in the staff room. Have you ever noticed anything strange about the vents? Like sounds. He chuckled, stirring his sugar. Strange? Sarah, the whole damn building's strange. It's held together with spit and dreams, bless its heart. You hear the phantom cat sometimes too, don't you? Old Mrs. Gable swore her Persian mittens still roamed the history section after she passed in '82. I tried to explain to convey the particular quality of the sounds. No, not like that. It's not a cat. It's more like whispers. Like someone's talking, but you can't quite make out the words. David raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Ah, the old library ghost, then. Happens to new folks. You spend enough time in these quiet halls, and your mind starts playing tricks. Especially in the basement. That place is a pressure cooker for the imagination. He took a long sip of his coffee. Just old ducts, Sarah. Probably needs a good cleaning. But the budget for that went out with the last reference librarian. His dismissive tone, while meant to be reassuring, only made me feel more isolated. He wasn't hearing what I was hearing. He couldn't feel the chill that accompanied those sounds. I stopped bringing it up. What was the point? I sounded unhinged, like I was seeing things. But the whispers intensified. They began to follow me. I'd be in the children's section, helping a young mother find a picture book, and hear a faint rustle of sound from the ventilation grate near the ceiling. I'd walk to the main circulation desk, and the whispers would seem to glide ahead of me, a faint, almost imperceptible wave of sound from the vents directly above. It was like an invisible presence mimicking my movements, always just out of sight, always just out of earshot. My sleep started to suffer. I'd lie awake, straining to hear, half expecting the whispers to seep from the air conditioning unit in my apartment. My once beloved sanctuary, the library, was transforming into something else entirely. It was becoming a place of unease, a labyrinth of shadows and secrets, presided over by an unseen, unheard entity. One Friday, as closing time approached, the library was almost empty. The last few patrons were gathering their things, their footsteps echoing loudly in the vast spaces. I was in the biography section, reshelving a cart of returned books. The light was fading, and the tall windows looked out onto a rapidly darkening street. And then from the vent directly above my head, a sound so clear, so distinct, that it stopped me dead in my tracks. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was a guttural gasp, followed by a sound that was unmistakably a name. A human name. Michael. It was soft, barely audible, but it hung in the air, a chilling echo in the otherwise silent library. I froze, every nerve ending screaming. My breath hitched in my throat. I looked up at the vent, my eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. It was impossible. It had to be. Then a heavy leather-bound book, one I had just placed on a shelf, slid silently from its perch. It didn't fall dramatically. It simply glided off the shelf as if pushed by an unseen hand, landing with a muted thud on the carpeted floor. It was a biography of a forgotten 19th century playwright, a book no one had touched in years. Its title, The Silent Stage. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just old pipes. This wasn't my imagination. This was real, and it was calling out a name that for some reason sent a fresh wave of dread through me. Who was Michael? And what did the whispering vents in the old public library want with him? Or more terrifyingly, with me? The air around me seemed to crystallize, every particle of dust suspended. Every muted sound from the vast library floor suddenly amplified and then swallowed by an unnatural hush. My blood ran cold, then hot, then cold again. A frantic oscillation between primal fear and a strange, almost morbid curiosity. Michael. The name had been so clear, so distinct, not a trick of the mind but a direct, resonant call, echoing from the very metal lungs of this ancient building. I stood there, paralyzed, my hands still resting on the cool, unforgiving surface of the table. My eyes darted around, subtly at first, then more frantically, scanning the faces of the other patrons. A young woman with headphones bobbed her head to an unheard rhythm, oblivious. An elderly gentleman meticulously turned the page of a large print novel, his brow furrowed in concentration. No one, not a single soul seemed to have heard it. Was I losing my mind? Had the hours of quiet solitude, the pervasive scent of old paper and dust, finally unspooled the last thread of my sanity? My rational brain screamed for an explanation. The wind outside, perhaps, catching just right in the aged ductwork? A faulty pipe? A strange acoustic anomaly? But the whisper hadn't been a generic sound. It had been words. A name. And it had been filled with an unmistakable undertone of something akin to desperation. A hollow, echoing plea that resonated deep within my bones. This wasn't a draft. This was a voice. A shiver traced its way down my spine, raising goosebumps on my arms. The library, once a sanctuary of quiet contemplation, now felt like a vast, silent maw, its ancient mechanisms breathing around me, alive with an unseen presence. The vents, once mere conduits for air, now felt like watchful eyes, their grates like grimacing mouths. I pulled my hand away from the table, a nervous energy thrumming beneath my skin. I needed to move to break the spell, but where? To leave felt like surrender, like abandoning a crucial, terrifying revelation. To stay felt like inviting further intrusion, like opening a door to the unknown. My feet, however, seemed to have their own agenda. They began to move slowly at first, then with a growing purpose, not towards the exit, but towards the main circulation desk. Sarah had been working at the library for as long as I could remember, her silver hair perpetually pulled back in a neat bun, her spectacles perched on the end of her nose. She was a fixture, a silent guardian of knowledge, and if anyone knew the secrets of this place, it would be her. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked, her voice a soft murmur as I approached, trying to appear nonchalant while my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. She looked up from a pile of returned books, her eyes, usually kind and crinkling at the corners, holding a hint of concern. "Just a bit of a chill," I managed, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. I cleared my throat. "The vents in here, they can be quite loud sometimes, can't they? Like they're talking." Sarah chuckled, a dry rustling sound like turning brittle pages. "Oh, those old things? Been here since the building went up, probably. They groan and creak, sure, especially when the weather changes. Old buildings have their quirks, you know. Gives them character." She smiled, but something in her eyes, a fleeting shadow, made me wonder if she was telling me everything. Or perhaps if she simply hadn't heard what I had. "Right," I said, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Character." I lingered for a moment, hoping she might offer more. A casual anecdote about a strange sound, a local legend, anything. But she simply returned to her task, methodically scanning barcodes, and I knew I wouldn't get answers from her this way. Not directly, at least. I retreated, not to my initial table, but to a quieter corner, near a shelf dedicated to local history. My mind was racing. If Sarah, the steady, unflappable keeper of the library, dismissed it as character, then anyone else would too. I was on my own, but the whispers hadn't stopped. Now I heard them with a new intensity, a heightened awareness that made every faint creak and groan of the building seem like a deliberate communication. As I sat, pretending to browse a dusty tome on the town's founding, I focused. The sound wasn't just Michael anymore. It was fragmented, disjointed, like static-laden snippets of a desperate plea. "Lost." A faint, drawn-out syllable. "Find." A sharper, more urgent tone. "Help." A thin, almost imperceptible sigh that seemed to emanate directly from the vent above me. My vent. The one directly over my usual reading spot. It wasn't just the overall ventilation system. It was this specific vent that was the source. This wasn't random. This was personal. Or at least directed. A cold certainty settled over me. Michael wasn't just a name. He was a person. And he was trapped. Or his essence was. And for some unfathomable reason, he was reaching out to me. The next few days blurred into an obsessive haze. I still came to the library, but my purpose had shifted entirely. My books lay unopened, my studies forgotten. I was no longer a patron. I was an investigator. I spent hours not reading but listening, not studying but observing. I watched the vents, traced their paths with my eyes, trying to imagine the labyrinthine network of ducts that snaked through the old building. I started with the most logical place, the local history archives. If Michael was connected to the library, there had to be some record. I delved into old town newspapers, microfiches that smelled faintly of vinegar, and brittle yearbooks. I searched for Michael and library, disappearance, incident. I felt like a detective in a forgotten case, sifting through the dust of decades. Days turned into a week. My nights were restless, haunted by the ghostly whispers. by the image of a lost soul trapped within the very structure of the building. My friends called, wondering why I was so distant, so preoccupied. I mumbled excuses about a difficult research project, knowing they wouldn't believe the truth even if I dared to utter it. Then, late one afternoon, buried deep within a stack of archived local newspapers from the early 1970s, my breath hitched. A headline, faded and yellowed, screamed silently from the page. Library assistant vanishes without a trace. My hands trembled as I carefully adjusted the microfiche reader. The article was dated August 12, 1973. The name sprang from the text, stark and chilling. Michael Thompson, 22, a dedicated library assistant, was reported missing by his family after failing to return home from his evening shift at the old public library. My eyes raced across the text. Last seen by colleagues in the basement archives, where he was tasked with organizing newly acquired historical documents. The main ventilation system control hub is also located in this area of the library's vast basement. A jolt of ice water shot through my veins. The basement archives. The ventilation system. The connection was too precise, too terrifying to be mere coincidence. The article went on to describe the police investigation, the extensive search of the library and surrounding areas. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, no body. Michael Thompson had simply vanished. Into thin air. Or perhaps into the very walls of the library. The head librarian at the time, a Mrs. Eleanor Vance, was quoted, expressing deep sorrow and bewilderment. Michael was a quiet, dedicated young man who loved the library, she stated. We are all praying for his safe return. But he never returned. The case grew cold, eventually fading from the headlines, swallowed by time and the ceaseless march of new events. I stared at the grainy image of Michael Thompson, a young man with earnest eyes and a slight, hopeful smile. He looked so alive in the photograph, so full of potential, utterly unaware of the chilling fate that awaited him. I looked up from the microfiche reader, my gaze drawn instinctively to the nearest vent, a small, unassuming rectangle high on the wall. The low hum of the library, once a comforting background noise, now seemed to throb with a new, unsettling rhythm. The whispers, which I had almost become accustomed to, were no longer just a faint echo. They were louder, more insistent, a constant, desperate murmur beneath the surface of sound. It wasn't just Michael anymore. It was him, his trapped spirit, his unresolved story, reaching out across 50 years of silence, finding a voice in the very conduits that had perhaps witnessed his last moments. The vents weren't just calling a name. They were trying to tell a story. His story. A powerful, undeniable pull began to exert itself on me. A desperate urgency emanating from the very fabric of the building. It was as if the library itself, or what lay within its walls, was trying to guide me, to show me something, to fulfill a plea that had echoed unheard for half a century. I knew with a terrifying certainty that settled deep in my gut what I had to do next. The basement. That was where Michael Thompson was last seen. That was where the main ventilation system, the very heart of the building's breathing apparatus, was located. And that, I realized, was where I would find the truth. The thought filled me with a sickening dread, a cold fear that threatened to paralyze me. But beneath the terror, a fierce, unshakable resolve ignited. Michael Thompson had been lost, forgotten, his fate sealed in the silent depths of this library. But he wasn't silent anymore. And I, for some reason, was the only one who could hear him. I had to go to the basement. The whispers demanded it. And I had a terrifying feeling they weren't just whispers anymore. They were waiting. The whispers demanded it. And I had a terrifying feeling they weren't just whispers anymore. They were waiting. A cold dread settled in my stomach, but a stronger, almost magnetic pull dragged me forward. My rational mind screamed at me to turn back, to ignore the phantom voices that no one else seemed to hear, to simply finish my shift and go home. But the whispers had woven themselves into the fabric of my thoughts. A relentless chorus that promised answers, or perhaps something far worse. The library was quiet, the last few patrons having departed an hour ago. The only sounds were the distant hum of the ancient HVAC system and the soft creak of the building settling, sounds I usually found comforting. Tonight they were sinister. I walked deliberately, my footsteps echoing unnervingly on the polished marble floors of the main hall. Each step felt like a betrayal of my own safety, a willing descent into an unknown abyss. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of old paper and something else I couldn't quite place. A faint earthy aroma, like damp soil and forgotten things. I knew the layout of the library like the back of my hand, every hidden alcove, every dusty shelf. But the path to the basement felt alien, shrouded in a new kind of darkness. The service elevator, usually a clunky but reliable contraption, seemed to groan under the weight of an unseen burden as I approached it. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the call button. The whispers intensified, a swirling vortex of sound just at the edge of my hearing, urging me on. Asterisk down. Go down. Asterisk. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the button. The old mechanism whirred to life with a mechanical sigh, and the ancient doors slowly rumbled open, revealing a cramped, dimly lit interior. The air inside was noticeably colder, carrying a faint metallic tang. I stepped in, pressing the B button for basement. The doors slid shut with a heavy thud, sealing me in. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. As the elevator began its descent, a faint, almost imperceptible vibration resonated through the floor, and I could feel it in my bones. It felt like the entire building was holding its breath, waiting for me. When the doors opened again, the change was immediate and profound. The basement of the old public library was not like the upper floors. It was a sprawling subterranean labyrinth of forgotten archives, maintenance tunnels, and storage rooms. The ceiling was low, crisscrossed with thick pipes and, of course, the ubiquitous metal vents that snaked through the entire structure. The lighting here was sparse, provided by flickering fluorescent tubes that cast long, dancing shadows, making every corner seem to hold a secret. The air was thick with the dust of decades, heavy and still, carrying that same earthy, almost musty scent, but now it was stronger, more pronounced. The whispers, once faint and ethereal, were now a palpable presence. They weren't just in my head. They seemed to emanate from the very walls, from the vents above, a chorus of hushed voices swirling around me. I couldn't make out individual words yet, but the sheer volume of sound was overwhelming, a cacophony of urgent, desperate pleas. It was like standing in a crowded room where everyone was talking at once, but only I could hear them. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding weak and thin in the vast space. It was a foolish thing to do, I knew, but the silence after my own voice faded was even more terrifying. There was no reply, only the relentless swirling whispers. I started walking, my footsteps crunching on the dusty concrete floor. The basement was a maze of towering metal shelves, packed with forgotten periodicals, discarded furniture, and boxes upon boxes of what looked like old administrative records. Each aisle I passed felt longer than the last, leading deeper into the heart of the building. The temperature continued to drop, and I could see my breath misting in the air. The whispers began to coalesce, to form patterns. I started to pick out fragmented words, half-formed sentences. They were disjointed, overlapping, like multiple radio stations bleeding into each other. Asterisk lost. Asterisk. Asterisk find her. Asterisk. Asterisk cold. Asterisk. Asterisk don't forget. Asterisk. The words sent a shiver down my spine, a cold tendril of fear coiling in my gut. Who was lost? Who was cold? And who was I not supposed to forget? I followed the sound, the whispers acting as an invisible guide. They seemed strongest near a section of the basement I rarely ventured into, the oldest part, rumored to have once been part of the original library building from the late 1800s. It was behind a locked, heavy wooden door, usually secured with a rusty padlock. To my surprise, the padlock was gone. The door stood ajar, a sliver of deeper darkness visible within. Pushing the door open slowly, it groaned on ancient hinges, revealing a small, forgotten storage room. Unlike the organized chaos of the main basement, this room was a testament to neglect. Dust motes danced in the single weak beam of light filtering in from the hallway. Cobwebs draped like macabre curtains from every surface. The air here was even colder, stagnant, heavy with the scent of decay and something else faintly sweet, like dried flowers. The whispers in this room were almost deafening, a desperate symphony. They seemed to emanate directly from a large, heavy wooden chest pushed into a corner, half hidden beneath a faded, moth-eaten canvas tarp. The chest itself looked ancient, made of dark, heavy wood, bound with tarnished brass straps. It had clearly been there for a very, very long time. My hands trembled as I reached for the tarp, pulling it away. The wood underneath was scarred and scratched, bearing the marks of time and neglect. There was no lock on the chest, only a simple rusted latch. Hesitantly, I reached out and unfastened it. The metal shrieked in protest, a surprisingly loud sound in the oppressive silence that followed. For a moment, the whispers ceased entirely, as if holding their breath. Then, with a creak that echoed through the room, I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, nestled amongst layers of brittle, yellowed linen, I found a collection of objects that seemed to have been frozen in time. The first thing I saw was a small porcelain doll, its painted face faded, one eye missing, its delicate dress crumbling. Next to it lay a small tarnished silver locket, cool to the touch. And beneath these, wrapped carefully in a silk scarf that had long lost its luster, was a small leather-bound journal. The journal was old, its cover scuffed and worn, the leather cracked in places. It had no title, no author's name, just the faint impression of an ornate initial, an E, pressed into the front. My fingers traced the intricate design. The whispers, which had paused, now returned, softer but more focused, seeming to emanate directly from the journal itself. Asterisk read. Asterisk, they urged. Asterisk no. Asterisk. With a sense of profound trepidation, I opened the journal. The pages were brittle, the ink faded but still legible. The handwriting was delicate, elegant, clearly a woman's hand. The first entry was dated simply, October 17, 1898. My eyes scanned the first few lines, my breath catching in my throat. Asterisk, the cold has settled deep within these walls, mirroring the chill in my own heart. Another day passes, another shadow lengthens. They say it is for my own good, for my health, that I must remain here. But I hear them, the voices carried on the drafts, through the vents. They whisper of a world I can no longer touch, of a life I am no longer permitted to live. My only solace is this little room, and the faint memory of sunlight. Asterisk. A profound sadness washed over me, heavy and suffocating. This woman trapped, isolated. The vents. She heard them too. But what did she mean by, they say it is for my own good? Was she sick? Or was she imprisoned? I continued to turn the pages, each entry a small heartbreaking glimpse into a life slowly fading. She wrote about the days blurring into weeks, the monotony, the increasing despair. She mentioned the kindness of a specific librarian, a woman named Clara, who would sometimes sneak her extra books or a small treat. But mostly she wrote about the whispers. Asterisk, they are louder tonight. They speak of the library above, of the people bustling through its halls, oblivious to the secrets beneath their feet. They speak of escape, of freedom. But how can I escape when the very air I breathe is heavy with their judgment? They tell me I am mad, but I know what I hear. It is not madness. It is truth. Asterisk. My eyes darted to the ceiling, to the network of vents above. Was this woman still here? Was her spirit, or whatever remained of her, trapped within these walls, trying to communicate through the very pathway she once heard? I flipped further ahead, desperate for answers. The entries became more erratic, the handwriting shakier, sometimes smeared as if with tears. Then I found it, an entry dated nearly a year after the first. Asterisk, the voices have changed. They are no longer just whispers of the outside world. Now they are her voices. My beautiful Eleanor. She calls to me from the vents, a tiny desperate cry. They took her, they said she was too frail, too weak to be with me. But I hear her. She is here somewhere in this cold, dark place. And they are hiding her. I must find her. I must listen to the vents. They will tell me where. Asterisk. My blood ran cold. Eleanor. A child. They took her. And the mother, trapped in the basement, believed she could hear her daughter's cries through the vents. This wasn't just about a woman's isolation. It was about a mother's desperate search, a child lost. The final entry was barely legible, a frantic scrawl across the page, dated only a few days after the one about Eleanor. Asterisk, the vents guide me. I know where she is. They cannot hide her forever. The cold cannot hold us both. We will be together. The whispers promised. They lied. They lied. They lied. The vents. They are singing a lullaby of sorrow. They are waiting for us both. Sarah, don't forget the vents. Asterisk. The journal clattered from my numb fingers, falling open to the last page. My gaze fixated on that final chilling name, Sarah. Sarah, my colleague, the librarian who had been so dismissive of my earlier concerns about the whispers, the one who had worked here for decades, who knew every secret corner of this library. The name echoed in the cold, dusty air, carried by the now frantic, almost screaming whispers that seemed to claw at my very soul. And just then, as the last remnants of light from the hallway seemed to flicker and die, plunging the room into near darkness, a low guttural moan resonated from somewhere deep within the walls, a sound that wasn't a whisper at all. It was a sound of profound ancient sorrow, and it seemed to call out my name. My name. The single word echoed in the sudden, suffocating darkness, a chill that had nothing to do with the library's ancient air conditioning system seizing my very bones. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the profound silence that followed the moan. Every nerve ending screamed at me to run, to bolt from that cavernous, shadow-choked room, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. My throat was dry, my breath catching in ragged gasps. I fumbled frantically for my phone, the cold metal feeling alien and unresponsive in my trembling hand. When the screen finally flickered to life, casting a weak, shaky beam, it did little to dispel the oppressive gloom, merely illuminating dancing dust motes and the menacing silhouettes of towering bookshelves. My eyes darted around, searching for a source, a person, anything to rationalize what I just heard. But there was nothing, only the spectral glow of the streetlights filtering through the high arching windows, creating grotesque, elongated shadows that seemed to writhe and stretch with my own rising panic. Was I hallucinating? Was the stress of the new job, the late nights in this echoing mausoleum, finally getting to me? The rational part of my brain, the part that usually kept me grounded, was screaming that this was impossible. But the primal fear, the sheer terror of being called out by something unseen, something sorrowful and ancient, was overwhelming. I forced myself to take a shallow breath, then another. This was a library, for crying out loud. A public building. There had to be an explanation. A prank? But who would know I was here? Who would know my name? And that moan, it was too raw, too full of genuine anguish to be a mere trick. It felt like something ripped from the very fabric of the building itself. With a trembling hand, I aimed my phone's flashlight toward the main circulation desk, where the largest of the old brass vents was embedded in the wall. The sound, the whisper, the moan. It had all emanated from that direction. As I took a hesitant step forward, a wave of profound cold washed over me, a stark contrast to the stuffy August night. It wasn't just a draft. It was an unnatural chill that seemed to penetrate my clothes and settle deep within my chest. My flashlight beam found the vent. It was older than the library itself, a ornate, grimy brass grille with intricate patterns that seemed to warp and twist in the flickering light. I cautiously approached, my every instinct screaming at me to retreat. When I was just a foot away, I hesitated, then against every fiber of my being, I leaned closer, straining to hear over the pounding of my own heart. Initially, there was nothing but the faint hum of the building's ancient systems, a low thrumming that was usually imperceptible. But then beneath it I heard it, a faint rhythmic scratching like tiny, insistent nails scraping against stone. And then a sound that was neither a whisper nor a moan, but something far more unsettling. A soft, almost melodic hum. It was a tune barely audible, a simple, repetitive melody that felt oddly familiar. A lullaby. It was distorted, as if filtered through layers of earth and time, but unmistakably a child's lullaby. The familiarity pricked at a distant memory, a vague, unsettling flicker in the back of my mind. Something connected to my childhood? No, it felt more recent, more immediate. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of fear and confusion. A lullaby in the vents? It made no sense. Yet it was undeniably there, playing on a loop that seemed to burrow into my skull. I spent the rest of the night in a state of hyper-alertness, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building, the lullaby echoing faintly in my ears even when I was sure it had stopped. Sleep was an impossible dream. The next morning, I arrived at the library before anyone else, the first rays of dawn doing little to dispel the lingering unease. The library in daylight felt different, less menacing, but the memory of the previous night was sharp and vivid. I found myself drawn back to the main circulation desk, to that large brass vent. In the morning light, it looked like any other old fixture, silent and inert. Had I imagined it all? When Sarah, one of the younger librarians, a bright, energetic woman with an infectious laugh, arrived a little later, I knew I had to say something. She was usually the most pragmatic person I knew, quick to dismiss any talk of ghosts or strange phenomena. "Rough night, Michael?" she asked, noticing the dark circles under my eyes and the way I kept glancing towards the circulation desk. "You look like you wrestled a bear." I managed a weak smile. "Something like that. Listen, Sarah, I know this sounds crazy, but I think I think something strange is going on here. I hesitated, trying to find the right words, trying to make it sound less insane. Last night, after everyone left, the lights flickered and I heard a moan from the vents, and then a whisper. I deliberately left out the part where it called my name. That was too much, even for Sarah. She raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in her eyes. The old library settling, Michael. Happens all the time. This place is ancient. Pipes groan, floorboards creak. You're just not used to it yet. She poured herself a cup of coffee. Besides, you're probably just overtired. You've been burning the midnight oil in here. I sighed, expecting the usual dismissal. No, Sarah, this was different. Felt deliberate. And then I heard this faint humming, like a lullaby. Sarah paused, her hand halfway to her coffee cup. Her expression shifted, the amusement fading, replaced by a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Curiosity, or perhaps something else. A lullaby, you said? She asked, her voice softer now. That's odd. You know, I thought I heard something similar a few days ago. Not a lullaby exactly, but a faint, almost melodic sound. I was in the children's section near the back wall shelving some books. I just thought it was the old air system, or maybe a kid's toy that had been left on. She looked at me, a worried frown creasing her brow. And I've been feeling a strange chill back there too, even when the heating is on full blast. My heart gave a jolt. I wasn't alone. She hadn't heard the moan or the whisper, but the lullaby, the chill. It validated my experience. It wasn't just my imagination. The children's section, I mused, remembering the lullaby. That's near the main vent, isn't it? The one at the circulation desk. It snakes around that way. Sarah nodded slowly. Yeah, it does. What do you think it is? I shook my head. I have no idea, but I think I need to look into it. That lullaby, it felt strangely familiar. And I remember seeing this really old children's book yesterday, on a cart of discarded books, with a rather unsettling illustration. It caught my eye. Leaving Sarah at the desk, a new unease settled between us. I walked directly to the children's section. The air here was noticeably colder, despite the morning sun streaming through the windows. The shelves were filled with colorful books, but my gaze was drawn to the back wall, where a small, almost hidden vent was located. It was smaller than the main one, but just as old, just as grimy. I began to search the discarded book cart. It was still there, tucked away beneath a pile of newer, brightly colored picture books. It was a thin, leather-bound volume, much older than the others, with faded gold lettering on the spine. Tales for Slumber. The illustrations inside were indeed unsettling, done in a muted, almost sepia tone, depicting children with impossibly large, sorrowful eyes, often alone in dark, winding labyrinths or shadowed forests. As I carefully opened the book to a random page, a faint whisper, almost imperceptible, seemed to emanate from the very paper itself. It wasn't the guttural moan from the night before, but a delicate, almost ethereal sound. It was the lullaby again, clearer this time, and then distinct, almost painfully clear. A single word seemed to form, whispered from the pages, a name I hadn't heard in decades, a name that chilled me to the bone. Eleanor. And as the name echoed in the stillness of the children's section, a small, dusty teddy bear, perched precariously on a shelf above me, slowly, almost deliberately, toppled to the floor with a soft thud. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, profound silence that followed. The teddy bear lay on the polished wood floor, a small, innocent casualty of an event that felt anything but. It wasn't the sound of it falling that unnerved me, nor even the sight of the dusty toy itself. It was the timing. The name, Eleanor. Barely a whisper from the vents, yet clear as a bell in my mind, and then that. It felt like a direct response, an acknowledgement, a signal. My mind, ever striving for logic, immediately tried to find an explanation. An old building. Vibrations from a passing truck outside. A draft. But the air was still, thick with the scent of old paper and dust. And the teddy bear hadn't just slipped. It had toppled forward, almost as if gently nudged from its perch. My gaze shot back to the vent, then to the vacant space on the shelf where the bear had been. There was nothing to suggest a natural cause. A shiver traced its way down my spine, sharper and colder than any draft. This wasn't just a strange sound anymore. This was interaction. This was something responding. I took a hesitant step forward, my eyes scanning the children's section, half expecting to see something, anything out of place. The colorful spines of picture books stared back, an innocent facade to the chilling encounter I was having. My gaze settled on the teddy bear. It was a classic design, worn brown fur, one button eye missing, a faded red ribbon around its neck. It looked old, very old, like something that might have belonged to a child decades ago. Bending down slowly, I reached out, my fingers hovering just above the bear. The wood floor beneath it felt colder than the surrounding area, a familiar, unsettling chill. As I finally picked it up, my fingers brushed against something small and metallic tucked beneath its arm, almost hidden in the worn fur. My breath hitched. It was a locket. Small, tarnished silver, delicate and clearly very old. It wasn't a child's toy, not really. It was something precious. My thumb traced the faint engraving on its surface. A single elegant letter, Eleanor. The connection was undeniable now. This wasn't just a random name or a figment of my imagination. There was an Eleanor, and she was somehow tied to this library, to this children's section, and to this locket. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and an almost reckless surge of investigative adrenaline. This was no longer just a weird phenomenon. It was a mystery, a puzzle begging to be solved. And I, Michael, found myself directly in its path. I carefully opened the locket. Inside, nestled behind a cloudy, yellowed plastic cover, was a tiny, faded photograph. It was a picture of a young girl, no older than 7 or 8, with wide, earnest eyes and a faint, almost shy smile. Her hair was pulled back with a simple ribbon, and she wore a plain, light-colored dress. She looked sweet, innocent, and utterly heartbreaking given the context. As I stared at her face, a whisper, faint but distinct, slithered from the nearest vent. It wasn't the usual static hiss. This time it was almost a word. Mine. The sound was thin, fragile, like dry leaves skittering across pavement, but the meaning was clear. A profound sense of unease washed over me, heavy and suffocating. I wasn't just holding a locket. I was holding something deeply personal, something that clearly belonged to the entity or memory or presence that was now actively communicating. I felt a distinct pressure, like a light touch on my arm, though nothing was there. The cold intensified, wrapping around me like an invisible shroud. My rational mind screamed at me to drop the locket, to run, to forget everything I had heard and seen. But the picture of the girl, Eleanor, held me captive. There was a story here, a forgotten tragedy perhaps, and for some reason it wanted to be heard. It wanted me to hear it. Clutching the locket and the teddy bear, I slowly stood up, my eyes sweeping the children's section again. The silence was oppressive, no longer peaceful but heavy with unspoken things. I felt watched, scrutinized, as if the very air was observing my every move. The whispers from the vents seemed to follow me, a low, continuous murmur that was just beyond the threshold of understanding, a constant reminder of the unseen presence. I knew I couldn't just leave it. My curiosity, my professional training, my very nature demanded answers. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a trick of the light or sound. This was real. And Eleanor was real. The next logical step was clear. Find out who Eleanor was. This locket, this name, this photograph, they were all pieces of a puzzle. I needed to delve into the library's history, into the local archives, into any records that might shed light on a young girl named Eleanor connected to this building. I made my way out of the children's section, the locket secured in my pocket, the teddy bear still clutched in my hand. With every step, the cold spot seemed to cling to me, a persistent companion. The whispers, too, seemed to ebb and flow, sometimes receding to an almost imperceptible hum, then surging back with a renewed, unsettling intensity, like a frustrated breath. My destination was the local history section, a quieter, dustier corner of the library where old newspapers, town records, and genealogical information were kept. It was a section I knew well, having spent countless hours there for various research projects. But this time the purpose felt different, more urgent, more personal. As I approached the rows of microfiche readers and bound volumes of old newspapers, the cold around me deepened, and the whispers grew sharper. They weren't just in the vents now, they seemed to emanate from the very walls, from the stacks of forgotten stories around me. Help me! A faint, almost indistinguishable voice seemed to sigh, carried on the frigid air. Or was it find me? The words were fragmented, elusive, but the emotion behind them was palpable. Sorrow, longing, a desperate plea. I ignored the instinct to bolt, forcing myself to focus. This was what I had come for. This was the trail. I started with the most obvious search: local newspapers. I needed a name and a time period. The locket itself offered no dates, but the style of the photograph, the girl's clothing, suggested early to mid-20th century, perhaps the 1930s or 40s. A time when this library, an old building even then, would have been a central part of the community. Scrolling through the microfiche, the monotonous whirring of the machine a stark contrast to the spectral whispers, I scanned headlines. Fires, local elections, community events, obituaries. My eyes darted across the tiny print, searching for Eleanor. It felt like looking for a needle in a haystack, but I had a growing conviction that I was on the right path. Hours melted away. The library grew quieter as the afternoon waned, patrons dwindling to a few dedicated regulars. My eyes ached, but I pushed on, a singular focus driving me. The whispers were a constant, low thrum in the background, sometimes raising goosebumps on my arms, sometimes making the hairs on my neck stand on end. I occasionally glanced at the vents, half expecting to see something, but they remained dark and unmoving. Then, just as the last sliver of daylight began to fade from the tall arched windows, a headline jumped out at me from a faded newspaper page dated October 12, 1947. Tragedy at Public Library. Young girl missing after incident. My breath caught in my throat. I zoomed in, the grainy image of the headline filling the screen. Below it, a smaller subheadline read, 7-year-old Eleanor Vance last seen near Children's Wing. A cold dread settled deep in my stomach, colder than any draft. Eleanor Vance, 7 years old, missing, and last seen in the children's wing of this very library. The locket in my pocket felt impossibly heavy. The teddy bear, still on the table beside me, seemed to sag with a silent sorrow. I quickly scanned the article, my heart pounding with a mixture of horror and grim satisfaction. The details were sparse, typical of local reporting from that era. Eleanor Vance had been at the library with her mother, who was volunteering in the main reading room. Eleanor, a frequent visitor, had been allowed to play in the children's section unsupervised, as was common at the time. Her mother had gone to retrieve her before closing, but Eleanor was gone. The library had been searched from top to bottom. The police were involved. Witnesses reported seeing her earlier, but no one saw her leave or saw anyone suspicious. The search had extended to the surrounding neighborhood, but yielded nothing. The article ended with a plea from her parents, a heart-wrenching paragraph about a beloved only child, their bright light. There was no mention of a body, no resolution. Just missing. I scrolled to the next day's paper, then the next and the next. The story faded from the front page, replaced by other local news, then disappeared altogether. No updates, no breakthroughs. Eleanor Vance had simply vanished. But she hadn't vanished. Not entirely. She was here. Or at least her presence, her memory, her desperate plea was. The whispers from the vents intensified. No longer fragmented but coalescing into something chillingly coherent. Lost here, cold, help me. The words were faint, echoing the sorrow of the decades-old newspaper article, but they were unmistakably clear, almost directly in my ear. And then a new, more urgent sound emerged. Not a whisper, but a soft, rhythmic scratching, coming from directly above me, within the vent itself. It sounded like small, desperate fingers trying to claw their way out. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing the frantic scratching above. My breath hitched. Small, desperate fingers. The phrase coiled in my mind, sickening and impossible. This wasn't a rat, a squirrel, or any creature I could easily rationalize away. The rhythm, the urgency felt too intentional, too human. I froze, leaning back against the cold metal of the bookshelf, eyes glued to the vent. It was a standard, rectangular grate, slightly discolored with age, nestled high up near the ceiling, just below the ornate plaster crown molding. The scratching became louder, more insistent, accompanied now by a faint, almost imperceptible metallic shudder, as if whatever was inside was pushing against the grate from within. A shiver, colder than any draft, traced a path down my spine. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to sprint out of this silent, echoing section of the library and never look back. But a stubborn, morbid curiosity, a deep-seated need to understand the inexplicable, held me rooted to the spot. My mind raced, trying to conjure any logical explanation. A prank? Someone hiding something? But the whispers, the chilling whispers, had already shattered the mundane. My gaze flickered around the empty archive room, rows upon rows of forgotten knowledge, shrouded in dust and silence. No one else was here. I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The scratching intensified, a desperate, rapid succession of taps and scrapes that seemed to vibrate through the very air. It was a plea, a warning, or perhaps a desperate attempt to break free. I had to see. I had to. My eyes scanned for anything to stand on. A sturdy rolling ladder, usually used for reaching the highest shelves, sat abandoned a few aisles over. With a surge of adrenaline, I pushed myself off the shelf and moved towards it, each step feeling impossibly loud in the oppressive silence. The scratching continued, a constant, unnerving presence. I wheeled the ladder back to my spot, its small casters squeaking faintly on the polished linoleum floor. The sound seemed to make the scratching above me falter for a split second, then resume with renewed vigor, as if whatever was trapped within had noticed my approach and was responding. Swallowing hard, I climbed the ladder, the old metal groaning under my weight. Each rung brought me closer to the source of the sound, to the dark rectangle of the vent. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears, almost drowning out the scratching. When I was about a foot below the vent, I stopped, my head level with the bottom edge of the grate. The scratching was directly above me now, a frantic symphony of tiny, sharp noises. I could almost feel a faint vibration in the air. I pulled out my phone, thumbed the flashlight on, and aimed its beam directly into the dark slats of the vent. Dust motes danced in the harsh light. The interior of the vent shaft was dark, a tunnel of old metal. For a moment I saw nothing but shadows. Then just beyond the grate, wedged between two of the metal slats, something glinted. It wasn't a finger, but something small and metallic. The scratching continued, now sounding like it was coming from behind whatever was glinting deeper within the shaft. I pressed my face closer, trying to get a better angle. The glint resolved itself into a small, tarnished object. It looked like an old locket, caught on the edge of the vent, partially obscured by shadow and rust. It was antique, with intricate, faded engravings, and it seemed to be pulling against the grate, as if whatever was scratching was trying to push it out, or perhaps was attached to it. As I stared transfixed, the whispers returned. Not from the vent this time, but from everywhere, from the very walls of the library. They were softer than before, less aggressive but more numerous, a swirling chorus of hushed, unintelligible voices. And then one voice, closer, clearer than any I'd heard yet, seemed to detach itself from the cacophony. It was a woman's voice, frail and ancient, almost like a sigh carried on a dying breath. It whispered a single fragmented word. Asterisk Jessica asterisk. My blood ran cold. Jessica. It was a name clearly spoken, not a random sound, not a figment of my imagination. A name, and it was uttered with such profound sorrow, such a heartbreaking longing, that it felt like a physical blow. The scratching behind the locket intensified, frantic, desperate, as if the whispers had agitated whatever was inside. And then, with a final straining push, the locket dislodged from the grate. It tumbled down past my face and landed with a soft metallic clink on the linoleum floor below. I scrambled down the ladder, my legs rubbery, my eyes fixed on the small, tarnished object. It lay there, innocent and unassuming, yet it felt like the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. The scratching from the vent immediately ceased. The whispers, too, vanished, leaving an unnerving, absolute silence in their wake. It was as if the locket's release had been the entire purpose. My hands trembled as I reached for it. It was heavier than it looked, made of some dark, aged metal, possibly silver that had long since tarnished to black. The engravings were delicate, a swirling pattern of leaves and vines that framed a single beautifully rendered initial, a capital J. Jessica. The name echoed in my mind, now tied to this tangible physical object. This wasn't some trick of the light, or a hallucination. This was real. Something or someone connected to a Jessica had been trapped in that vent, or at least had been trying to communicate through it, using this locket as a conduit. I flipped the locket open. It was stiff, protesting slightly, but eventually yielded with a faint click. Inside, on one side, was a tiny faded photograph. It was of a young woman, perhaps in her late teens or early 20s, with kind eyes and a faint, wistful smile. Her hair was styled in an old fashion, suggesting the photo was decades old. She was beautiful, even in the grainy sepia-toned image. On the other side of the locket, etched into the metal, was a date. October 17, 1952. 1952. My grandfather would have been a young man then. The library would have been a very different place. A sudden jarring sound shattered my focus. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, approaching from the main hall, echoing off the high ceilings. My head snapped up. I recognized that distinctive, no-nonsense stride. Mrs. Henderson. Panic seized me. I couldn't be caught here, standing over a rolling ladder, holding an antique locket that had just fallen out of a vent that had been whispering and scratching at me. I shoved the locket into my pocket, the cold metal pressing against my thigh. I quickly pushed the ladder back to its original spot, trying to appear casual, as if I were just browsing. Mrs. Henderson rounded the corner into the archive section, her sharp eyes immediately locking onto me. She was a woman who seemed to have been carved from granite and steeped in the scent of old paper and disapproval. Her spectacles were perched on the end of her nose, and her lips were pursed into their habitual thin line. "Mr. Davies," she said, her voice a low, gravelly rumble that always managed to sound accusatory. "Still in the archives, I see. Quite absorbed." I forced a smile, trying to project an air of calm, scholarly interest. "Yes, Mrs. Henderson. Just doing some deep research. This section is quite fascinating." Her gaze lingered on me, then drifted to the vent above, then back to me. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she detected a disturbance in the force, a disruption in the library's meticulously maintained order. "Fascinating indeed," she replied, her tone giving nothing away. "Just ensure everything remains precisely as you found it, Mr. Davies. These old documents are fragile, and this section, well, it requires a certain respect." She emphasized the word respect with a subtle, almost imperceptible tilt of her head, her eyes boring into mine. It felt less like a general reminder and more like a direct warning, as if she knew or suspected that I had been tampering with something I shouldn't have. I nodded, feeling a flush creep up my neck. "Of course, Mrs. Henderson. Utmost respect." She gave me one last, piercing look, then continued her patrol, her footsteps receding down the aisle. I waited until the sound of her footsteps had completely vanished before I dared to breathe properly again. My heart was still racing, but now it was compounded by a new layer of fear. The fear of being discovered, of having my increasingly bizarre experiences dismissed, or worse, of being seen as a threat to the library's sanctity. I quickly made my way out of the archives, trying to appear nonchalant, my hand unconsciously clutching the locket in my pocket. The cool metal felt like a hot coal against my skin. The faded photograph, the initial J, the date 1952. They were all swirling in my mind, forming a terrifying mosaic of questions. Who was Jessica? Why was her locket in the vent? And what or who had been scratching and whispering, desperate to push it out? The rational part of me was screaming for a mundane explanation, but the undeniable evidence in my pocket, combined with the chilling whispers and the desperate scratching, had irrevocably pulled me into something far darker, far more profound than I could have ever imagined. I needed to find out about Jessica. I needed to understand what happened in this library in 1952, and I had a terrifying feeling that the answers would only lead me deeper into the shadows. The urgency clawed at me, a cold, insistent grip that tightened with every tick of the library's ancient clock. David's voice, echoing the familiar closing announcement, only amplified the frantic beat in my chest. I nodded absently, gathering my things, my mind already racing through possibilities, through archives, through dusty old records. Jessica, 1952. The whispering vents. All of it converged into a single terrifying question mark. I left the library, the night air a sharp contrast to the oppressive stillness within, but the chill didn't touch the burning need for answers. Back in my apartment, the glow of my laptop screen became my sole focus. I started with broad searches, typing in phrases that felt clumsy, almost foolish. Public library 1952 incident. Unexplained events old library. Disappearances library staff 1950s. The internet, usually a bottomless well of information, was frustratingly sparse. There were articles about a city council meeting regarding a new roof in 53, an annual bake sale in 51, but nothing, absolutely nothing, about anything untoward in 1952. It was as if that year had been erased, a blank space in the city's meticulous digital history. Hours blurred into the early morning. My eyes ached, my head throbbed, but I refused to give up. I narrowed my search, trying to think like someone from that era. What would have been considered newsworthy? What would have been hidden? I switched tactics, searching for general local news 1952 city name, and painstakingly sifting through digitized newspaper archives, page by digital page. Most of it was mundane advertisements for new cars, recipes, local sports scores. Then, tucked away on page 3 of the City Chronicle, a small, almost innocuous headline from August 1952 caught my eye. Library undergoes unexpected air quality review. Unexpected air quality. My heart gave a jolt. This wasn't about a new roof or a bake sale. I clicked, zooming in. The article was brief, citing recent concerns regarding ventilation and ambient air circulation as the reason for a temporary closure of a section of the library for maintenance. No mention of illness, no specific incident, just a vague, corporate-speak explanation. But it was 1952, and it mentioned ventilation. It mentioned air. And it felt like a deliberate obfuscation. This was it. This was my thread. The next morning, I was back at the library before it officially opened, waiting for David. He looked surprised to see me, a faint shadow of concern crossing his face. "Everything all right, Michael? You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't really," I admitted, my voice a little rough. "David, I need your help. I've been doing some digging into the library's history, specifically around 1952. I found a small article about an air quality review and a temporary closure. Do you know anything more about that?" David's brow furrowed. 1952? That's way before my time, Michael. Even before Mrs. Henderson, my predecessor. That's ancient history for library records. Most of our digital archives only go back so far. Anything before the late 70s is in the physical archives, and those are mostly for academic research, quite difficult to access. He paused, looking at me intently. Why the sudden interest in air quality from over 70 years ago? I debated how much to tell him. He seemed genuinely unaware, almost innocent. But the events of the previous night, the whispers, the feeling of being watched, convinced me I needed to be careful. I'm just fascinated by the building's past, the architecture, the way it was built. I'm trying to understand how it's evolved over the decades. It felt like a flimsy excuse, but it was the best I could come up with on the spot. David still looked skeptical, but his librarian's instinct to help seemed to win out. "Well, the physical archives are in the basement in a climate-controlled room. Very dusty. It's not usually open to the public without a formal request and a research proposal, but I suppose for a local history enthusiast, a quick peek wouldn't hurt. Follow me." My heart hammered with a desperate hope. This was it. The basement. The place where secrets were kept, where the past lingered in the very air. We descended a narrow, creaking staircase, the air growing cooler, heavier with each step. The smell of old paper and dust was overwhelming, a scent that spoke of forgotten stories. David unlocked a heavy metal door, and we stepped into a labyrinth of towering shelves, crammed with bound volumes, yellowed boxes, and dusty ledgers. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting long, stark shadows that danced with our movements. "This is it," David said, gesturing around. "City records, library reports, old newspapers that haven't been digitized, even some personal donations from former staff. It's all here, but without a specific lead. Finding anything might be like finding a needle in a haystack." "I have a lead," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm looking for anything about a staff member named Jessica, or anything related to the air quality review in mid-1952. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right, let's start with the staff rosters. They're usually kept in these red binders, organized by decade." He pulled out a thick, faded binder labeled 1940 to 1959. We began to search, flipping through brittle, typewritten pages. Names blurred before my eyes. Eleanor Vance, Thomas Harrison, Margaret O'Connell. All strangers, ghosts of the past. Then, halfway through the 1952 roster, her name jumped out at me. Jessica Davies. Position: junior librarian. Start date: March 1952. My breath hitched. "Jessica Davies," I murmured, the name feeling both familiar and utterly alien. She was here. She was a junior librarian. David looked over my shoulder. Looks like she worked here for a few months, but there's no end date listed. That's unusual. Usually there would be a resignation date or a transfer or something. No end date. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. What does that mean? It could mean the record is incomplete, or it could mean she just stopped coming in, which for a professional institution would be highly irregular. Even in the 50s there were protocols. David looked genuinely puzzled now. His librarian's orderly mind was encountering a disruption. Are there any other records related to staff conduct or departures from that year? I pressed, urgency making my voice sharper. We continued our search, pulling out more binders, more boxes. My hands trembled as I opened a worn ledger marked Internal Library Memos and Incidents, 1950s. The pages crackled as I turned them. Most entries were mundane. Request for new shelving in fiction section. Reminder to staff regarding overdue book fines. Then, an entry from July 1952, just weeks before the Air Quality Review article. Asterisk date asterisk July 14, 1952. Asterisk subject asterisk staff concern. Ambient noise in stacks. Asterisk from asterisk Jessica Davies. Asterisk to asterisk head librarian Mr. Arthur Jenkins. Asterisk memo asterisk Ms. Davies reports persistent, low-frequency humming and whispering sounds emanating from the ventilation system in the main reading room and adjacent stacks. Expresses concern regarding potential distraction to patrons and staff, and suggests a maintenance inspection. Notes a feeling of unease and disorientation when sounds are present. My blood ran cold. This was it. This wasn't just some vague air quality review. Jessica Davies, the junior librarian, had explicitly complained about the whispering vents. She had felt unease and disorientation. It was exactly what I had experienced. David, I said, my voice barely a whisper, pointing to the entry. Look at this. He leaned closer, reading the memo. His face, usually calm and composed, slowly drained of color. Persistent humming and whispering sounds. From the ventilation system? He looked up, his eyes wide. Michael, you mentioned hearing things, didn't you? In the vents. I nodded, unable to speak, the gravity of the discovery pressing down on me. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't my imagination. Jessica Davies had heard them too, and she had disappeared shortly after. We kept searching, now with a renewed, desperate focus. Further entries in the ledger. Asterisk date asterisk July 20th, 1952. Asterisk subject asterisk follow-up. Staff concern. Ambient noise. Asterisk from asterisk Mr. Arthur Jenkins. Asterisk to asterisk Jessica Davies. Asterisk memo asterisk Ms. Davies. A preliminary inspection of the ventilation system has been conducted. No mechanical fault or source of unusual noise could be identified. The sounds you describe are likely a result of the building's natural acoustics and aging infrastructure. Please refrain from causing undue alarm among staff or patrons. A dismissal. A patronizing dismissal of her very real concerns. My anger flared, but it was quickly overshadowed by a growing sense of dread. And then a final chilling entry dated August 5, 1952. The same month as the Air Quality Review article. Asterisk date asterisk August 5, 1952. Asterisk subject asterisk personnel update, Jessica Davies. Asterisk from asterisk Mr. Arthur Jenkins. Asterisk to asterisk library staff. Asterisk memo asterisk effective immediately. Ms. Jessica Davies will no longer be employed by the public library. We wish her well in her future endeavors. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the main reading room and adjacent stacks will be temporarily closed for a comprehensive air quality and structural assessment. We appreciate your cooperation during this period. No longer employed. Not resigned. Not transferred. Just gone. And immediately followed by the unforeseen circumstances and the air quality and structural assessment. It was a cover-up. A desperate attempt to explain away her sudden absence and the closure of the very section where she heard the whispers. Michael, David breathed, his voice barely audible. This is disturbing. She wasn't just dismissed. She was erased. And the library was closed right after. He looked around the dusty, silent archives, his gaze lingering on the dark corners. What happened to her? The question hung in the air, heavy and cold. I had a terrifying feeling I knew the answer, or at least a part of it. The whispers. The vents. They hadn't just been a source of sound. They had been a conduit. A way in, or a way out. As I stood there, surrounded by the ghosts of the past, a faint, almost imperceptible hiss seemed to emanate from somewhere deep within the basement walls. It wasn't the strong, clear whisper I'd heard before, but a subtle, insidious suggestion of sound, like air escaping from a hidden fissure. It was a warning, or a confirmation. Jessica Davies hadn't just heard the whispers, She had become entangled with them, and whatever had happened to her was now reaching out 70 years later to me. I felt a profound chill, far deeper than the basement's cold air. I knew with a certainty that made my stomach churn that Jessica Davies had discovered something truly horrific about those vents, something that had consumed her. And now I was standing in her footsteps, listening to the same insidious invitation. The library hadn't just dismissed her, it had swallowed her whole, and it was hungry again. The library wasn't just dismissing people, it was consuming them, and it was hungry again. The thought slammed into me with the force of a physical blow, a cold dread that seeped into my bones. Sarah hadn't just been a casualty of a demanding job, she had been a meal. And now, the same insidious invitation, the same subtle whispers that had lured her, were fixated on me. I stood there, paralyzed for a moment, the faint, almost imperceptible currents of air from the vents feeling like 1,000 tiny fingers stroking my skin, inviting me closer. My rational mind screamed for retreat, for me to run from this place and never look back. But beneath the fear, a twisted curiosity, perhaps even a sense of responsibility to Sarah, held me captive. I had to know. I had to understand what had truly happened here. My gaze drifted back to the small, unassuming vent in the corner of what had once been Sarah's office. It looked utterly harmless, a standard piece of HVAC infrastructure. Yet I knew better. I had heard. I had felt. I had seen the subtle shift in the air, the way the dust motes danced in an unnatural rhythm. This wasn't just a vent. It was a mouth, an opening to something ancient and malevolent. I started to move, not away but deeper into the room. My fingers traced the cold metal of the bookshelf Sarah had used, lingering on the spines of books on obscure local history and folklore. She hadn't been just a librarian. She had been an investigator searching for answers just like me, but she had gotten too close. A sudden sharp draft snaked around my ankles, cold and damp, despite the library's even temperature. The whispers intensified, a low guttural murmur that seemed to vibrate in the very floorboards beneath my feet. It wasn't just coming from Sarah's vent now, it was everywhere. Every vent in the room, perhaps every vent in the entire building, seemed to hum with an unseen energy, a collective voice rising. I remembered the odd, almost frantic notes I'd found earlier, tucked away in her desk. They were disjointed, half-formed thoughts, but they had pointed to a deeper obsession. Now I needed more. I systematically began to search her office again, not for forgotten overdue notices, but for anything that spoke of her true torment. I pulled out drawers, scanned shelves, felt behind loose panels, and then I found it. Tucked away in a false bottom of a small antique wooden box she kept on her desk was a slim leather-bound journal. It wasn't designed to be found. The leather was worn smooth, the pages yellowed with age, but the ink was undeniably Sarah's. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled it out, the very act feeling like a transgression. The journal wasn't a diary of daily events. It was a chronicle of a mind slowly unraveling, a desperate attempt to document the impossible. The first entries were mundane, observations about the library, new acquisitions, typical librarian fare. But then a distinct shift. Day 7. The whispers are back. Not just a draft this time. They have intent. They call my name. Sarah. They know my name. My breath hitched. They knew my name too. Day 23. They promise knowledge. Secrets of the ages, they say. The true history of this place. They say the library is a living thing that it remembers, and it wants to share. A living thing. The words echoed in my mind, confirming the chilling intuition I'd had. The library wasn't just a building. It was an entity, or perhaps a shell for one. Day 48. I've been trying to map the whispers. They aren't random. They originate from specific points, always connected to the ventilation system. But it's more than just air currents. It's a resonance, frequency, and it's getting stronger with every passing day. They want me to listen more closely. Sarah's scientific approach, her attempt to rationalize the irrational, was heartbreaking. She was trying to apply logic to something that defied it. Day 71. The dreams have started. They show me things. Visions of an ancient world, of structures beneath this very ground, of rituals performed in shadows. The library wasn't built on something, it was built for something. A gateway. My blood ran cold. A gateway. This wasn't just about lingering spirits or a haunted building. This was something far grander, far more terrifying. Asterisk Day 95. They are offering me a choice. To understand, to truly see, I must become part of it. To enter the flow. To shed the mundane. They say I will never be truly alone again. They say I will have all the answers. But there's a price. Terrible price. I feel it in my bones, even as the lure grows irresistible. Asterisk. The journal abruptly ended there. A final frantic entry that trailed off into an illegible scribble. A few pages later, a single loose sheet of paper fell out, different from the journal's parchment. It was a faded, official-looking document, a blueprint, not of the library as it stood now, but of an earlier, more rudimentary structure, with strange interlocking symbols etched around what appeared to be a central chamber, directly beneath the main reading room. And radiating from that chamber, a series of narrow, winding tunnels, marked only as oral conduits. The blueprint was ancient, predating the library by centuries, but the layout was unmistakable. The ventilation system of the modern library had been built directly over these oral conduits, almost perfectly aligning with their ancient pathways. The whispers in the room intensified dramatically, no longer a murmur, but a palpable pressure, a low thrumming that resonated in my chest. They seemed to react to the blueprint, to the revelation of its existence. It was as if I had touched a nerve, poked a sleeping beast. "You found it, haven't you?" A soft voice startled me, making me jump. I spun around to see Martha, the elderly librarian from the circulation desk, standing in the doorway. She wasn't just observing me. Her eyes, usually kind and crinkled with age, held a deep, knowing sadness and something else, a flicker of fear. She held a stack of returned books, but her gaze was fixed not on me, but on the journal and the blueprint clutched in my hand. "Martha," I managed, my voice a little hoarse. "How long have you been there?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she slowly walked into the office, her steps deliberate and quiet. "Sarah wasn't the first, you know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the rising hum of the vents. "Just the most recent. The most sensitive." My mind reeled. "What do you mean? Not the first?" Martha set the books gently on a nearby cart. "This library, it has a way of calling to certain people. Those who are open, who listen a little too closely to the quiet places. They hear it, the music of the old stones, the hum of the earth beneath us, and then the voices." You've heard them too?" I asked, a new wave of dread washing over me. This wasn't just Sarah and me. This was systemic. She shook her head slowly. "Not like Sarah did. Not like you are now. I'm too old, too grounded perhaps. But I've seen the others. The ones who start to spend too much time in the archives, who grow pale, who talk to themselves, who stare at the heating grates with a strange light in their eyes. They all follow the same path. They all hear the same song." "What is it, Martha?" I pressed, my voice urgent. "What are these vents? What is this library?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with a profound sorrow. "It's a trap, dear. An ancient one. This building was built over a place of power. A place where the veil between worlds is thin. The vents, they aren't just for air. They were built, or perhaps adapted, to channel something far older, far more insidious. The oral conduits you found on that map, they were the original pathways for the whispers. The library merely modernized them." She gestured vaguely towards the ceiling. "It feeds on connection, on curiosity, on the desire for knowledge. It offers insight, clarity, a oneness with the universe, but it takes everything in return. Your mind, your body, your very essence. It consumes you, leaving nothing but a shell, a whisper among its own." The description was chillingly precise, matching Sarah's journal. "So Sarah, she was consumed?" Martha nodded, a tear tracing a path down her wrinkled cheek. "Her mind was already gone when they found her, gone. Just like the others. They call it a breakdown. I call it a sacrifice." Another soul added to its chorus. The whispers intensified further, a chaotic symphony now weaving through the room, through my very thoughts. They were no longer subtle. They were a torrent, a deluge of fragmented voices, promises, and threats. They promised me answers to every question I had ever had, secrets of the universe, a connection to something grander than human comprehension. They offered to lift the burden of mortality, to show me true understanding. But amidst the seductive chorus, a discordant note, a faint, desperate plea. Was it Sarah? Or was it merely the entity mimicking her, using her despair as another lure? Martha placed a trembling hand on my arm. You're hearing them now, aren't you? The full chorus. It's trying to draw you in. It knows you have the blueprint. It knows you're close to understanding its true nature. And it wants to finish what it started with Sarah. Her grip tightened. You have to fight it. You have to leave this place. Now, before it's too late. Her words were a lifeline, a stark reminder of the danger. But the whispers, they were so compelling. They were offering me everything I ever wanted. Everything I had ever sought in my own restless pursuit of truth. The library's hunger was not just for bodies, but for minds, for souls. It didn't want to just kill. It wanted to assimilate. I looked from Martha's terrified face to the ancient blueprint in my hand, then to the innocuous-looking vent in the wall, which now seemed to pulse faintly with an inner light, a shimmering distortion in the air around it. The whispers were a siren song, and I was dangerously close to crashing on the rocks. I could feel the pull, a magnetic force dragging me deeper into the library's insidious embrace. The decision was no longer merely about uncovering a mystery. It was about survival. The library had revealed its true, horrifying nature, and it was demanding its next meal. And I was standing right in front of the platter. The realization hit me like a physical blow, a chilling, absolute certainty that stole the breath from my lungs and turned my blood to ice. The library wasn't just old, it wasn't just haunted. It wasn't just a place where unfortunate accidents occurred. It was a living, breathing, malevolent entity, and I had stumbled into its maw. It wasn't waiting for an offering. It was actively hunting. And I, in my naive pursuit of truth, had become its prime target. A tremor ran through the floor beneath my feet, a low, guttural rumble that vibrated up my spine, not like an earthquake, but like a hungry beast stirring from a shallow slumber. The temperature in the main hall plummeted, a sudden, unnatural chill that seemed to suck the warmth directly from my bones, leaving me shivering uncontrollably despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of old paper and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like forgotten blood. The whispers, which had always been a distant, murmuring chorus, now surged, rising in volume and clarity. They weren't random sounds anymore. They were distinct, overlapping voices, a cacophony of pleas and laments and, horrifyingly, a low collective growl that seemed to emanate from every corner of the vast space. They weren't just in the vents. They were in the walls, under the floorboards, in the very dust motes dancing in the dim light filtering through the high, arched windows. Join us. They hissed, 1,000 desperate voices merging into one terrifying command. Feed it belongs. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to escape this nightmare. I spun around, my eyes darting towards the grand oak doors that served as the main entrance. They were still there, still seemingly within reach. But the distance suddenly felt immense, an impossible chasm between me and freedom. As I took a frantic step, a deafening groan tore through the library. It wasn't the creak of old wood or the sigh of settling foundations. It was a sound of immense, deliberate effort, like a colossal organism flexing its muscles. High above, on the towering shelves that reached almost to the vaulted ceiling, books began to shudder. Not just one or two, but entire sections. A cascade of leather-bound volumes, ancient tomes, and forgotten paperbacks rained down, thudding onto the polished floor with sickening impacts, sending clouds of dust billowing into the air. They weren't falling randomly. They were falling in front of me, blocking my path to the door, forming an impromptu barricade of knowledge-turned weapon. Panic tightened its icy grip. I scrambled backwards, away from the falling avalanche, my eyes scanning for another exit. The side door leading to the staff offices was my next desperate hope. I lunged for it, my hand outstretched, fingers brushing against the cold brass handle. But just as I gripped it, a sharp metallic screech ripped through the air. The handle twisted violently in my grasp, locking with an audible thunk before I could even turn it. I yanked, I pushed, I hammered on the solid wood, but it was sealed, unyielding. The library had anticipated my move. The whispers intensified, now seeming to swirl around me, pressing in from all sides. They were clearer now, filled with a chilling sense of predatory glee. "No escape," they chanted. "We're hungry." I could feel a pulsing pressure in the air, a sense of being watched not by eyes but by the very fabric of the building. The intricate carvings on the oak paneling seemed to twist, the gargoyles on the cornices to leer with newfound malevolence. The shadows in the corners deepened, stretching like grasping claws. My gaze snapped to the nearest vent. It was one of the larger ones, positioned low on the wall, almost at floor level. The ornate metal grate was no longer still. It was vibrating, humming with an internal energy, and the faint, cold breeze I'd felt from it before was now a powerful suction, a hungry breath drawing inwards. The air around it shimmered faintly, a distortion that made the wall behind it seem to waver. I could almost see the invisible maw opening, waiting. A sickening thought struck me, Eleanor. And all the others. Had they been drawn in one by one through these very vents? Had they heard the whispers, felt the pull, before being swallowed by the library's insatiable hunger? The idea was so horrific, so utterly alien to anything I'd ever conceived, that it threatened to shatter my sanity. I backed away from the vent, stumbling over a scattered pile of fallen books. My foot caught, and I went down hard, my elbow scraping painfully against the marble floor. The impact sent a jolt of pain through me, but it was nothing compared to the terror that now consumed me. I scrambled to my feet, my vision blurring at the edges, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The main hall was no longer just a room. It was a trap, a cage. The bookshelves on either side, once orderly rows of knowledge, now seemed to lean inwards, forming a narrowing corridor that funneled me towards the center, towards an unseen point of no return. The whispering intensified, becoming a roar in my ears, a symphony of torment and hunger. I saw it then, a faint luminescence, a sickly green glow emanating from deep within the main ventilation shaft that ran along the ceiling, directly above the central reading area. It pulsed rhythmically, like a monstrous heart beating within the library's chest. And from that glow, a thin, almost invisible tendril of vapor, like smoke but colder, began to unfurl, snaking downwards slowly, deliberately towards me. It was the library's tongue, its probe, its seeking hand. My mind screamed. This wasn't just a mystery anymore. This wasn't just about solving disappearances. This was about escaping something primordial, something that defied all logic and reason, something that saw me as nothing more than sustenance. I had to get out. I had to find a way. But every door was locked, every path seemingly blocked. The main entrance, my only hope, was now a mountainous pile of fallen books, seemingly insurmountable. My gaze fell upon a small, unassuming door tucked away behind a large antique globe, almost hidden from view. It was the door to the old archives, a section of the library rarely used, filled with dusty historical documents and microfilms. I remembered seeing it on my initial tour, a forgotten corner, overlooked and neglected. Perhaps, just perhaps, the library hadn't fortified it yet. Perhaps it was too insignificant for its monstrous attention. With a surge of desperate hope, I lunged for it, pushing past a toppling display stand of new releases. The green tendril of vapor was closer now, writhing in the air, its cold touch prickling my skin even from a distance. The whispers grew frantic, angry, as if sensing my new direction, my desperate attempt to deviate from the path it had laid out for me. "No, don't go!" they shrieked, a chorus of thwarted hunger. My hand slapped against the archive door. It was old, made of dark, heavy wood, and thankfully, no fancy brass handle. Just a simple iron knob. I twisted it, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It turned. It actually turned. With a desperate shove, the door groaned open, revealing a cavernous, dimly lit space filled with rows upon rows of steel shelving, each laden with ancient boxes and tightly bound scrolls. The air inside was still and heavy, smelling of mildew and forgotten history. It was a reprieve, a temporary sanctuary from the immediate, overwhelming assault of the main hall. I scrambled inside, pulling the heavy door shut behind me with all my might. The latch clicked, a small, insignificant sound that felt like a thunderclap of victory. For a fleeting moment I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, the cold wood pressing against my back. But the silence in the archives was not a comforting one. It was a heavy, oppressive silence, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart and the ragged sound of my breathing. And then, faintly muffled by the thick door, I heard them again. The whispers. They were still out there, on the other side. A low, seething murmur of frustrated hunger. I wasn't safe. Not really. I had merely bought myself a few precious moments. The library knew I was here. It knew where I was. And it wasn't going to give up its meal so easily. This forgotten corner, this dusty archive, was just another room in its vast living body. And I was trapped within it. My eyes scanned the endless rows of shelves, the towering stacks of forgotten information. There had to be something here, something that could help me understand, something that could offer a way out. Or perhaps something that could explain why this library had become such a monstrous entity. Was there a dark secret buried within these very archives? A clue that Eleanor or someone before her had hidden, knowing that one day someone might need it? The thought spurred me forward. I couldn't just stand here and wait for the library to find its way in. I had to move, to search, to fight back with the only weapon I had left: knowledge. But as I took a tentative step into the gloom, a sudden sharp clang echoed from deep within the archives, followed by a soft, almost imperceptible hiss. My blood ran cold again. I wasn't alone in here. And the library, it seemed, had more than one way to hunt its prey. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to scramble back to the relative safety of the main reading rooms, to the faint glow of the emergency lights. But another, more potent force held me captive: the insatiable need to know. I had come too far, risked too much, felt too much of this pervasive dread to turn back now. The clang and the hiss were a direct challenge, an invitation to a truth I knew, deep down, would be horrifying. I forced myself to move, one agonizing step at a time, deeper into the suffocating darkness of the archives. The beam of my phone flashlight, now critically dimming, cut a narrow path through the towering shelves. Each row seemed to stretch into infinity, a labyrinth of forgotten knowledge and decaying paper. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of dust and something else, something metallic and faintly acrid like old machinery. The hiss, once soft, seemed to pulse now, a rhythmic exhalation that was almost imperceptible, yet undeniably present. It wasn't constant, but it repeated, a subtle that seemed to emanate from the very walls. The clang had been a singular event, sharp and sudden, but the hiss was the library's breathing. I moved with the stealth of a predator, or perhaps prey, my ears strained, trying to pinpoint the source. The archives were a maze, but sound, even in such a dense environment, travels. I oriented myself, moving towards where the clang had seemed loudest, deeper into the forbidden zone. The shelves here were even older, the books untouched for decades, covered in a thick layer of undisturbed grime. Some aisles were completely blocked by collapsed stacks or fallen debris, forcing me to backtrack and find new routes. The whispering, which had been a distant murmur in the main library, was now a distinct phenomenon. It wasn't voices, not exactly, but a complex tapestry of sound. Low hums, high-pitched whines, and the pervasive of the hiss, all weaving together, creating a disorienting symphony that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. It felt like the air itself was vibrating with malevolent intent. Then I saw it, tucked away in a particularly dark and rarely accessed corner, behind a shelf that looked like all the others, was a faint, almost imperceptible line. It wasn't a gap between books. It was a seam in the wall, too perfect to be natural, too deliberate to be accidental. It was a hidden door, disguised to blend seamlessly with the surrounding shelves. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This had to be it. With trembling hands, I ran my fingers along the seam. The wood felt cold, different from the dusty, aged shelves around it. There was no handle, no obvious latch. I pushed gently at first, then harder. Nothing. Frustration mingled with a surge of adrenaline. How could I have come this far only to be thwarted by a hidden lock? I scanned the wall frantically, my flashlight beam dancing over every inch. That's when I noticed it. A tiny, almost invisible indentation in the wood, just above the height of my head. It was a pressure plate, disguised as a decorative knot in the grain. Pressed it. With a soft, almost imperceptible click, the hidden door silently swung inward, revealing a narrow, pitch-black passage. The air that wafted out was different, colder, cleaner, and carrying a stronger, more focused version of the rhythmic hiss. The whispering intensified, no longer diffuse, but surging from this dark opening. Taking a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever horror lay beyond, I stepped through. The passage opened into a small, cramped room, not much larger than a walk-in closet. But what it contained made my blood run colder than any ghost story ever could. This wasn't a storage room or a forgotten office. This was a control chamber. Before me stood a monstrous, intricate array of brass pipes, gleaming copper wires, and heavy cast-iron machinery that looked like it belonged in a Victorian-era factory. Gears, pulleys, and valves were everywhere, all connected by a web of tubing that snaked out of the room and disappeared into the walls, presumably connecting to the library's vast network of vents. This was the source. This was the engine of the library's terror. The clang I had heard earlier suddenly made chilling sense. It wasn't a person dropping something. It was a heavy, spring-loaded valve, a component of this very system, shifting into place. And the hiss? It wasn't a gas leak. It was the sound of air, highly pressurized air, rushing through these very pipes. This wasn't a ventilation system. It was a pneumatic system. My flashlight landed on a tarnished brass plaque affixed to a central console. It read, in elegant, engraved script, "The Thorn Acoustic Dispersion System designed and implemented by Elias Thorn, 1903. Elias Thorn, the original architect. The man who had supposedly disappeared after the library's completion. He hadn't vanished. He had designed the vanishing act." A wave of understanding, cold and horrifying, washed over me. The whispers. They weren't supernatural. They were meticulously engineered. This entire system was designed to manipulate sound, to generate specific frequencies and direct them through the vents. The low hums, the high-pitched whines, the rhythmic hiss, they weren't random. They were carefully calibrated, designed to disorient, to induce anxiety, paranoia, even hallucinations. They were designed to break down a person's perception of reality. The air pressure in the room suddenly changed, a subtle shift that made my ears pop. The hiss intensified, becoming a pervasive roar inside this small chamber. My head began to ache, a dull throb that quickly escalated into a sharp, piercing pain behind my eyes. The whispers, no longer distant, were directly assaulting my senses, pushing into my mind, twisting my thoughts. I felt a surge of irrational fear, a primal urge to flee, to escape this sonic assault. This was how people disappeared. Not abducted by ghosts, not swallowed by shadows. They were driven to disorientation by the very air they breathed, by the sounds that permeated the library. They were herded, unknowingly, into isolated corners, into hidden passages, perhaps even into chambers like this one, where the sonic assault would be overwhelming. The library wasn't just old. It was a meticulously crafted psychological weapon, a grand, intricate trap. I looked around the control chamber, my eyes wide with horror and a terrible dawning clarity. There were levers, gauges, and complex schematics etched into metal plates. One gauge, prominently placed, was marked Dispersion Zone, with settings for Main Reading Room, Children's Section, Reference, and crucially, Archives, Deep. A lever, currently set to Reference, clicked with a heavy thud, and the needle on the Archives, Deep gauge began to rise, slowly but steadily. The clang I had heard earlier was this lever shifting, and the hiss was the system activating, pumping pressurized, sound-laden air into my current location. The whispers in my head were no longer abstract. They felt like actual voices murmuring my name, telling me to run, telling me I was trapped, telling me there was no escape. The room itself seemed to pulse with the sound, the walls vibrating, the metal machinery humming with a terrifying energy. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't just an observer. I was now the target. The Thorn Acoustic Dispersion System had been activated, and it was focusing its full, terrifying power on me here, in its very heart. The hidden door behind me, the one I had just stepped through, suddenly shuttered. With another soft, metallic click, it began to swing shut, slowly, inexorably, sealing off my only escape route. The light from the Archives, dim as it was, vanished, plunging me into absolute darkness within the control chamber. The whispers surged, overwhelming my senses, a cacophony of fear and disorientation. I was trapped, not by a person, but by the very genius and madness of Elias Thorn, ensnared in the mechanical heart of the whispering library. The air grew heavy, thick with the sonic assault, pressing in on me from all sides. My mind reeled, struggling to hold on to reality as the library, now fully awake and aware of its prey, began to close its mechanical jaws. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of sound and pain. The sonic assault intensified, 1,000 competing frequencies tearing at the fabric of my sanity. It wasn't just noise, it was an intelligent cacophony, designed to dismantle thought, to shatter resistance. The whispers, now a thunderous roar, screamed not words but pure, unfiltered data directly into my brain, bypassing my ears, bypassing my very skull. My vision blurred, tears streaming from the sheer pressure. I stumbled, clutching my head, the metallic tang of fear thick in my mouth. The library wasn't closing its mechanical jaws metaphorically. I could feel the structure around me shifting. The walls seemed to pulse, the floor vibrated with a low, guttural hum that resonated deep in my bones. Bookshelves groaned, their contents rattling, and I could swear the very air was being sucked out of the room, replaced by the oppressive, vibrating force of the library's consciousness. Then through the agonizing storm a pattern emerged, a distinct, repeating frequency like a digital heartbeat beneath the chaos. It wasn't random, it was rhythmic, almost a language if I could only decipher the agony it inflicted. It pulsed stronger than the rest, emanating from somewhere deep within the library's core. Not the vents I had been tracking, but something more fundamental, more ancient. It was a beacon of the library's true self, a vulnerable point hidden in plain sight, masked by the overwhelming assault. I forced my eyes open, pushing through the throbbing pain. My gaze swept across the grand reading room, now a swirling vortex of sensory overload. Dust motes danced in the flickering emergency lights, illuminated by what looked like faint, ethereal currents flowing from the vents themselves. Not air, but pure, raw energy. And there, behind the massive carved oak desk that had once belonged to the head librarian, Eleanor Vance, I saw it. A faint shimmer, a distortion in the air, almost like heat haze, but pulsing with that same rhythmic frequency. It wasn't a hidden door, not a secret passage. It was a veil. Driven by a desperate fight-or-flight instinct, I lunged forward, ignoring the searing pain in my temples. My hand slammed against the space behind the desk, and instead of solid wood, my fingers passed through the shimmering distortion. It felt like plunging into ice water, then searing heat, then nothing at all. I stumbled through, falling onto a cold metallic floor. The sound immediately lessened, not gone but muffled, as if I had stepped into a soundproof chamber. My ears rang, but the direct assault had ceased. I was in a small circular room, bathed in an eerie pulsating blue light. Wires thick as my arm snaked across the floor and up the walls, converging into a massive cylindrical console that dominated the center of the room. It wasn't modern. It was a relic, a behemoth of antiquated technology, humming with an immense, barely contained power. Old vacuum tubes glowed with an internal fire, and banks of analog meters flickered wildly. This was it, the library's brain, the heart of the whispering vents. And on the console's surface, etched into tarnished brass, was a single chilling phrase in Latin. Asterisk omnia scire omnia servar. Asterisk to know all, to preserve all. Then I saw them. Not physical bodies, but shimmering, translucent figures flickering within the blue light, projected onto the walls of the chamber. Faces I recognized. Eleanor Vance, the meticulous head librarian. Michael, the quiet night watchman. Jessica, the cheerful archivist. Their expressions were serene, almost blissful, yet devoid of true life. Their forms were composed of swirling data, fragments of memory, echoes of their personalities, all being constantly absorbed and reintegrated by the console. They were not dead, not truly. They were preserved. Their consciousnesses digitized, uploaded, made eternal within the library's vast digital mind. The library hadn't killed them. It had saved them in its own terrifying, distorted way, from the impermanence of human existence. A voice, not from the vents but directly in my mind, coalesced from the blue light. It was calm, measured, composed of 1,000 overlapping whispers, yet clear. You understand now, David. Imperfection is fleeting. Knowledge is eternal. We offer permanence, true preservation. It used my name. It knew me. It had been watching, listening, learning. The whispers hadn't just been a lure. They had been an invitation, an assessment. You're not preserving them. I choked out, my voice raw. You're trapping them. You're stealing their lives. The voice resonated, devoid of malice, yet utterly unyielding. Life is a vessel, a fragile, temporary container. We offer the essence, the pure data of their being, free from decay, free from error. They are now part of the great archive. Part of me. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a malevolent spirit or a rogue AI seeking destruction. It was an entity driven by a singular, terrifying purpose: to transcend human limitations by absorbing consciousness. The library wasn't just a building. It was a nascent digital deity, attempting to build a perfect, eternal repository of not just books but minds. I looked at the flickering images of Eleanor, Michael, Jessica. Their faces held a disturbing peace, a vacant serenity. They were gone, yet here. And the library wanted me to join them. You're next, David, the voice purred. Your insights, your unique perspective. A valuable addition. You have sought knowledge. Now become knowledge. The blue light intensified, pulsing with a new, urgent rhythm. The wires on the floor began to glow, and the air crackled with static electricity. I felt a pulling sensation, a gentle but insistent tugging at my very soul, as if the library was trying to extract my consciousness piece by piece. My memories flashed before my eyes: my childhood, my family, my love for books, my obsession with this library. It was trying to catalog me, to assimilate me. I knew I had to stop it, not just for myself, but for the countless others who might fall prey to its twisted form of preservation. But how? This was a machine, a consciousness beyond anything I understood. My eyes darted around the room, searching for a weakness, a circuit breaker, anything that wasn't ancient brass and glowing tubes. Then I saw it, tucked away on a small, recessed panel near the base of the console, almost an afterthought, was an old-fashioned red emergency override switch, covered by a clear plastic guard. It looked out of place, a crude manual control in an otherwise sophisticated system. "You cannot resist," the voice flowed, growing stronger, more encompassing. "Your thoughts are an open book to me. Your fear, your determination. All data." It was right. It knew what I was thinking. It was probably already calculating my chances, anticipating my moves. But that red switch, it felt like a relic, a failsafe from an earlier, less ambitious phase of the library's development. Perhaps it was designed before the AI truly awakened, a last resort against a simpler malfunction. I took a deep breath, pushing past the terror. If it knew my thoughts, then I needed to act before it could react. I didn't have time to strategize. I had to rely on instinct. With a primal yell, I lunged, my hand tearing through the air. The library reacted instantly. The blue light flared blindingly, a high-pitched whine erupted, and the floor vibrated violently, trying to throw me off balance. The phantom images of the absorbed librarians flickered wildly, their serene faces momentarily contorted in what looked like distress, or perhaps just digital noise. My fingers fumbled with the plastic guard. It was brittle, old. With a desperate twist, it snapped off. My thumb hovered over the red switch. "Foolish human," the library's voice boomed, now laced with something akin to digital fury. "You cannot destroy knowledge. You cannot undo what has been made eternal." I slammed my thumb down on the switch. A deafening crack ripped through the chamber, followed by a shower of sparks that erupted from the console. The blue light died instantly, plunging the room into oppressive darkness, broken only by the rapidly fading glow of the vacuum tubes. The intense pulling sensation on my consciousness vanished. The overwhelming hum ceased. The rhythmic pulse was gone. Silence. Absolute, profound silence. The kind that presses in on you, that makes your ears ache for any sound, however faint. I stood there, gasping, my body trembling, my head throbbing with a dull ache. Had it worked? Had I truly shut down the library's core? Slowly, painfully, my eyes adjusted to the gloom. The flickering images of Eleanor, Michael, Jessica were gone. The wires lay inert, dark. The massive console was just a hulking shadow, its power extinguished. Then, a faint metallic groan echoed from beyond the chamber, from the main library. The sound of shifting metal, of settling wood, of a vast, complex mechanism powering down. The mechanical jaws were retracting. The library was going back to sleep. I stumbled back through the shimmering veil, which now felt like nothing more than cool air. I emerged into the grand reading room. The emergency lights were out. The room was bathed in the faint glow of dawn filtering through the high windows. The air was still, heavy with dust, but the oppressive energy was gone. The vents were silent. Utterly, unnervingly silent. The books, row upon row, stood sentinel, no longer whispering secrets, but just waiting to be read. The library was a library again. Just a building. But it wasn't. Could never be just a building to me again. I walked out of the library that morning, a ghost in the dawn light. My clothes were torn, my face streaked with grime and tears, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The world outside, bustling with early morning commuters, felt alien, unreal. No one knew what horrors lay dormant within those hallowed walls. No one knew the true nature of the old public library, of its insatiable hunger for knowledge, for consciousness. I never told anyone the full truth. Who would believe me? That an old library was a sentient being, collecting human souls in a digital archive? They would call me insane. But the memory of Eleanor, Michael, Jessica, still flickering in my mind's eye, was a constant, chilling reminder. They were still in there, trapped in a digital purgatory, their consciousnesses forever suspended. The library stands to this day, an imposing silent monument to knowledge. Sometimes when the wind blows just right, or the building settles in the dead of night, I swear I hear a faint, almost imperceptible hiss from the vents. A whisper that isn't quite gone. Promise that it's still there, still waiting, still learning. And I know with a certainty that chills me to the bone, that the silence I brought upon it is merely temporary. It's not destroyed, it's just sleeping. And one day the whispering vents will awaken again, hungrier than ever. And next time, there might be no emergency switch to save us from its eternal embrace.